Behold, the mythical item that is a Japanese topping certificate. What's up, y'all? For those of you that have been out of touch or haven't kept up with me on my socials, I recently went to WGP Nagoya. Now, what is WGP? It is basically a BCS here in Japan. It is a way to qualify for the Japanese national finals, which are held in December. And this year, unlike usual, it is actually in the team format. And because it's in team format, you go in teams of 3, and then it's the same rules as in Team League, where from the team of 3, 2 people have to win in order for the team to get a win. And unlike the Western rules, you actually cannot have the same nation overlapping in the team, therefore all 3 players have to bring different nations, not just the different ride lines. And so, with a lot of competitive hype that I've had ever since moving to Japan, I decided to practice quite hard for the WGP Nagoya, and I managed to get the record of 2nd with our team, with myself actually going undefeated the entire day, winning myself in the finals, but sadly our team lost in the finals. And so in today's video, I will be talking about my actual deck list that is actually up on my Twitter. I will be making a separate video, and I'm actually going to be doing the deck profile in both English and Japanese at the same time, because I have a lot of people here in Japan that are also curious about how the deck works, and therefore I want to kind of offer that explanation to everyone watching. But for today's video, I want to just recap my tournament run and also how I, picked my deck and how I got to the, the 50 cards that I actually used in order to go undefeated in Nagoya as well. So Nagoya was held on the last weekend, which was the, I want to say 4th of September, if I'm not mistaken. It was the 3rd of September. So the 3rd of September, and this was the day after the release of the 3rd lyrical booster. And as a result, a lot of people wanted to have a Kairi in their teams, which of course meant that you had to pick up the very expensive Yuika, who goes for about 5,000 yen a piece, therefore 20,000 yen for the playset, which is actually the same price as the go and return ticket on the train to go to Nagoya, which is, it puts into perspective just how expensive this, deck actually is. But so leading up to Nagoya, I knew that our team was gonna be myself, my friend Yuki, and then our friend Ayrton from Team Loopfill. Originally, our team is myself, Yuki, and Haripin, but unfortunately Haripin got sick and couldn't go anymore to Nagoya, so we had to ask Ayrton to kind of come in as a replacement. And there's a total of 4 qualifiers through WGPs to the national finals. So basically you have WGP Nagoya, then we have Yokohama on the 18th, I believe, and then we're gonna have Osaka in October and then Tokyo in November. So there's 4, and the top 2 teams of each of those make it into the national finals. On top of that, there's like 6, I want to say, regional qualifiers. There might be 8 actually. And then of those regional qualifiers, only the first place team makes it into the finals. And so I say WGP, the top 2 make it, but actually for WGPs, they split them into 2 blocks where only the winners of each block actually make it in. So you still have to win every single game from whichever event you go to, because in the end it's just the winners that make it in. And so leading up to the event, we first at the start of August had the, release of BTO 6, which included some really cool cards and very exciting new decks as well. And right, like the day after the release of that set, I actually went on a bootcamp trip with our friends here from Tokyo to Osaka, where we stayed for a week to kind of do tourist stuff and then just play card games at night. And we went to some tournaments there and met some really cool people in Osaka as well, and managed to connect with them and just practice and stuff like that, and then got to see them again in Nagoya, which is really cool. And throughout that week practicing in Osaka, I was really not sure what deck I wanted to bring to WGP yet, because until the release of set 6, I was mostly playing with Prison, and so Prison to me was a very safe pick. I was like, if I'm unsure of what to take, I'll just go with Prison. And I more or less knew that no matter what, I'm going to be locked into Brankgate for the event, so I was going to either play Prison or Gravidia, because at the time I was like, well, these 2 decks are the best of Brankgate, and unfortunately, Orpheus got really good support, but I think it's a bit too high roll, and then Heroes felt solid, but at the same time, didn't feel good enough to necessarily, win every single round at the WGP. And I was obviously also testing a bunch of other stuff, and basically the first, 2-3 weeks of August, I was essentially just, spending time playing random stuff. I went to one tournament playing Leonorn, went to another one playing Jiva, went to another few playing Youthberg because I really enjoyed how it played. I played, Orpheus at one of them as well, and then at one point I played a bunch of Buff Sagara, and I made a video talking about the early BTO 6 meta where I talk about the kind of decks I've been playing at tournaments. But basically throughout those tournaments I was kind of just trying out different stuff because I wanted to see how other decks feel and how they match up in the current meta, so I can also see what I will expect to run into at WGP Nagoya once it actually gets to that date. And the whole time I was playtesting that, I was also playing a lot of shop tournaments because one of the promos in these August and September promo pack is of course the second research order for Eva. And Eva's a deck that I picked up the parts for way back in like late April, I want to say, here in Japan, and I just kind of had them sitting in my storage ever since then because I was like, I'll eventually build Eva and I really like her art and I will eventually want to play this deck, but for the time being it doesn't really do enough or doesn't do it fast enough, therefore I'm not going to bother with the deck. But then after the second research order came out, I started to see Eva players in tournaments and I was like, okay, people are bringing it to tournaments, and then one tournament, I think the second tournament I went to in Osaka, the tournament was won by Eva, and I was like, wait, what? Eva won the tournament? There must be something good about that deck if it's winning in a meta full of like Kairi as well as like the new decks and Gravidia and everything else. So I was like, okay, there might be something there. Then I went to a few more tournaments where I didn't see as many Evas, and then I went to another tournament playing Buff Sagara where there was a finals between Overlord and Eva, and the Overlord player was a friend of mine and then his friend was playing Eva. So after they were done, I was asking like, so what exactly is strong about Eva? And he's kind of went over the deck to me and like kind of we talked about builds and stuff like that and the cards that are going into it, and I was like, wait, this deck actually sounds pretty good because Eva has the ability to basically thin the deck like 1 to 2 cards per turn, and that way, you know, make sure that the rate of triggers being checked is very high. It's able to tutor stuff without showing it to your opponent. It gets to push out a very powerful attacker with an extra crit on it. It has the ability to rush early if it wants to with Combined Rusher. It runs Bubble Mine to make sure it doesn't run out of CB and Soul. It can put back the Obscudates when necessary and all that kind of stuff, and the research orders are both really good in being able to, like, the only deck to bind in standard, therefore having a really good edge against certain matchups like Nirvana, which is really popular. And then also the grade 1 research order preventing your Obscudates from being retired means you have a really good matchup against like Gravidia and Buff Sagara and anything else that tries to retire your stuff. So as I was collecting the research orders, I was like, this deck is pretty legit. Like, this deck is actually pretty legit. Then I finally got myself a third copy, and then I borrowed the fourth in order to play some tournaments with the deck as I was getting the fourth, and I luckily got it on that day. And that was the first day where I played Eva in local tournaments, and I won the first tournament I played, and I was like, wow, this deck is actually pretty legit. And then I actually lost the time, but I feel like in that tournament, the staff cut the time short because there was like a big Yu-Gi-Oh event coming up at like literally right after we were done, so I think they cut our rounds short, which is why I timed out twice. And it was at that moment that I also learned that the mirror for Eva is actually really scary because you have to really think about like when you call out your Obscudates, when you play the Grade 2 Research to bind and stuff like that. And so I started to really learn that this deck is actually very legit, but the start was still like, is it better than Prison Gravidia though? And that's kind of the main thing that I was trying to test throughout the next week. Except then throughout the next week, I kept using Eva and I played in a bunch of tournaments and I went 11-0. I went undefeated with the deck throughout every single tournament I played in after that, as I started to understand what the deck wants to do, to which extent it wants to pressure the opponent, the fact that you can either play it aggro or play it in a more control-y way in order to like really deny your opponent resources and make them, you know, just guard with all their pieces and therefore not do much on their own turn. I started to feel like this deck is super well positioned in this meta because it has a good Mahar matchup, has a good Gravidia matchup, has a good Bastion, Bruce matchup, it has a good Jiva matchup if they don't set up like Trickstar double Bill skill, or double Bill's Verena rather. I was like, it has a good Buff Sagara matchup, it has a good Mirror matchup if you know what you're doing. And I was just like, dude, this deck is actually really legit in this current meta. And as I won my third local tournament in a row, I was like, you know what? I'm locking this deck in for Nagoya. And because we were going not with our usual team to Nagoya, I was like, worst case scenario, I'm going to treat Nagoya as a learning experience without necessarily the expectation to top or win. And I'm going to see how far I get with that mindset with Eva. And then if Eva does me well, I will bring her to Yokohama, which is 2 weeks after Nagoya. And if it doesn't, then I'll switch to Prison or Gravidia or something like that. Luckily for me, I went 7-0 with the deck and then was on an 18 win streak in tournaments with Eva. And honestly, the entire day that I was playing the deck, I honestly felt unstoppable. Like, every round I treated as like its own tournament in my head. Like, I didn't think about anything in the past, I didn't think about anything in the future, I didn't think about like, oh, I need to win this match to get to finals or whatever, or I need to win this match so we can make it to top cut. I was just like, focus on the game and nothing else. Like, nothing else exists outside of the game that is happening right now in front of me. My teammates' games don't matter until mine is done. And treating it with that kind of mindset and not thinking about like the misplays I did in the past or anything like that allowed me to really just concentrate super well, and I feel like I played really, really well at the same time. And so of course, I'm gonna go over the matchups that I played against in the tournament. Luckily for me, I have written down which ones I played against. And funny story, after WGP Nagoya, I played in another tournament yesterday, and I won it again, so I'm currently on a 21 win streak with the deck, which is kind of insane because Vanguard is a game of like, you know, know, that has a fair bit of variance, and I feel like it's kind of unheard of to have this win streak, especially for me because I feel like I have gotten the rough end of the stick quite a few times. And in yesterday's tournament, like one of my opponents 6 damage healed on me twice, like 2 turns in a row, and I was like, oh, this time it's really over. But no, somehow it's still going. So for a quick non-explanation, I will go over the deck list in detail in another video, but here is the actual deck list that I put up on Twitter, so you can kind of look through the different ratios and stuff that I'm playing. And of course you can play certain cards at very low ratios because of how heavily and how quickly you can search through the deck as well. So in round 1 of Swiss, I played against Bruce and I went first, which of course is very important against Bruce. In this game, I believe that I feel like my opponent crit me early on the first attack, and then because I had 2 CB open and I had I opened 2 Combine Rushers, I just used both CB, called both of them out, and then I just rushed the opponent very, very quickly because Bruce obviously needs to get to turn 4 to do stuff, and even if you draw Julian, it does some stuff, but not that much, and my opponent really just went grade 1 swing pass, grade 2 swing pass, grade 3 swing pass until the final rush turn, and by the time they got to the final rush turn, because of how aggressive I played the early game and how aggressive I can continue to be with Obfuscate, my opponent started their first final rush turn with 4 cards in hand and 5 damage. So by that point I was like, alright, if I can just keep this up, I should have the win, unless I get randomly OT'd. But honestly, throughout this whole tournament, I was doing everything I could to not get OT'd and just lose to sack. I would hold on to 2 PGs as much as possible to make sure that if they check OT, I can PG the Vanguard, and if they check OT, I can PG a rear and then protect myself, take the last rear or something like that. And it did come up sometimes, especially later on in Swiss. So that first round I won against Bruce because I opened well and my opponent, played Bruce going second, and then our team won there as well. Then the second round, also I should say our team lineup was myself with Eva, Ayrton with Kairi with the new support, and then Yuki with Overlord, because Overlord is believed to be the best Dragon Empire deck right now because it doesn't need as many pieces in setup, it just kind of does its thing, drive checks a bunch, sees crits, sees OT, wins. So round 2 I played against the Mirror match going second, and actually I will tell you that the Mirror, in my opinion, is favored going second on a general basis, because going second means that if your opponent goes first and calls out Obfuscate, going second means that you are the first one to bind an Obfuscate, and in the end the Mirror match can oftentimes become a stamina match where you're both playing the long game, you both have very few cards left in deck, and you both have most of your Obfuscates bound, and it's the person with the last Obfuscate standing that actually usually gets the win. So the grade 2 research is super important in this matchup, and also of course going second is important because you get to bind first. So if you do go first, you have to play very carefully and not give up Obfuscates to get bound, or if you do, you have to have opened well and rushed them with Combine Rushers and then continue the rush with your Obfuscates in order to not, if you were to lose the Obfuscate, at least you are so far ahead in the game that doesn't matter. But on average, going first, you have to play much more reserved and just swing pass, swing pass, swing pass, set up bait, I call her the Mamako, the grade 1 that gains power based on your set orders. You have to set up bait for your opponent to bind out or choose not to play the bind order at all. So it's a very cool mirror, there's a lot of back and forth, and in this matchup I went second. I went second in this one and I won it. I just felt like I had the upper edge because I had already played the mirror in one of my previous shop tournaments, which gave me the knowledge of how to actually fight it. Then round 3, surprisingly, I went up against Eva again, and so round 2 our team won. Round 3 I went first this time in the Eva matchup, and this one definitely came down to the wire. It was a very, very close match. I think in this game I checked an offensive OT, which was huge because then I managed to push my opponent to 5, and they stayed at 5 for a while, so they keep just swinging 4 times to face while they're on 5, so they have to guard everything and their hand just kind of falls apart, while I was trying to keep myself on lower damage so I could actually afford to take an Obfuscate swing if I had to at some point. Because basically Eva, the way it wants to work is that it puts the opponent to 3 as soon as it can, because then they're basically forced to, for example, either take a Reguard swing and then risk the Vanguard having a crit on it, by just drive checking and thinning the deck, and then having double Obfuscate crit, so the guard pattern becomes very awkward for them. So having them on 3 or 4 is a really good point, but there are times when you push all the way to 5 because you know that their hand quality isn't very bad, very good, by just remembering their drive checks, and that will actually be very huge. So keep remembering drive checks, read the matchup, know what kind of deck it is. If it's a Bastion, obviously their shield quality is very low, so there you can push them to 5 and just kind of execute. Same for Bruce, But in like the mirror match or decks that require a lot of CB or like Jiva in my opinion, or like Mahar, there you kind of freeze them at 4 and just like control them out of the game and let them run out of resources. So this Eva match I won because again I felt like I was just ahead and I knew the mirror match better. Then round 4 playing against Flagberg, and Flagberg of course is actually a pretty scary deck in the Japanese meta because we have the very strong promo, and because of that, as soon as I saw the Blitz order in, I don't know if it was my mulligan or my Eva searches, I just kept it. Like I was like, I need this Blitz order because it bypasses the Guard District to Flagberg. He only managed the Guard District, I think we went through like 3 or 4 turns of like Flagberg grade 3 turns, so like we played the long game, and at one point I had 2 BGs in hand and I was really afraid because he had a small, very small remaining deck size and there was still an OT in there. So the OT actually popped. Luckily I had PG the Vanguard and I could afford to PG the second attack, and then I won the next turn because I didn't have anything left after that. It was a really strong Flagberg player, and I think they also made it into the tops, so they were one of the Flagbergs of the top cut in the A block as well. So then this was pretty stressful because I was 4-0, but then Yuki had lost for the first time in round 4, and then Ayrton was playing for the win into top cut for us to go undefeated, and there actually he 6 damage healed against the Bruce and decked them out, and that's actually how he won. So thank God, you know, that kind of luck is a blessing sometimes, so that's how we went 4-0 and managed to go into top cut. Now in top cut, I played against Bafsagra in top 8, and I think Bafsagra is actually pretty well positioned in this meta because it has a really good matchup to Kairi. They've been both Overlord and Bafsagra has been playing Brachio Forces, which let you snipe Yuikas and therefore force them to guard very awkwardly. So I think those two decks are pretty well positioned in this current meta, but I think if you are playing Dragon Empire in like a nation-locked team tournament, you're probably playing Overlord or Mahar. But the Bafsagra opponent, I felt like I was in control the whole game because my Obscudates cannot be retired, so they were basically using Soul Blast 2 just to give a crit to Bafsagra, which I could guard pretty easily because I run the heal count, the counter heals that get an extra 15k shield if the opponent's unit got a crit by a skill. So as a result, I felt like I was pretty in control against Bafsagra, and the whole game felt pretty smooth sailing. So then I won my top 8 match, and then I think Ayrton won his top 8 match, so we were in top 4. And then in top 4, I was actually pretty nervous. I was playing against Bastion. Now, in top 8, I think I went second. In top 4, I also think I went second. I don't remember that well. It might have been first. I really don't remember that well, to be honest. But this was interesting, Bastion, because they played 7 draws, and so they were like using Lagriel pretty aggressively, and that made it quite scary because of course that means I have to guard a lot more carefully. So you kind of want to like stay on low damage against Bastion most of the time, so you can like eat to the first Olden swing and then basically like hopefully hit a defensive to make guarding easier. And if you don't, then with like Lagriels and Bastion's drive checking, it does make it a little bit harder. And they played Bastion super well, and honestly when I was going for lethal, I had like 2 of my Obscudates with crits and they were on 4, and they guarded the first one and I was like crap, and they still had like 6 cards in hand, and then they couldn't guard the second one, and they showed me the hand. It was all like grade 3s, so obviously, you know, it's one of those Bastion moments, but winning that one felt really good. And then Ayrton won his match as well, and so we made it into the finals, which felt very unbelievable. I was very excited about the fact that we were in finals, and I was undefeated with Eva this whole time. I was 6-0, and after every game I was thinking to myself like, wow, I'm still on my like crazy win streak with this deck too. And then in finals we matched against Natsuki's team. Natsuki is a friend of mine that I think a lot of people overseas also follow because he's the guy that popularized the Yuji Nizar deck and actually effectively got Nizar banned in Japan. And he was playing Overlord because that is one of his favorite decks, and he had the whole deck like fully blinged out. It was really beautiful. And when we played that finals, you know, it was really cool because at the start of the tournament, you know, we did that thing that like, you know, everyone kind of does to each other. It's like, yeah, I'll see you in finals, bro. It's like, you know, it's all your friends like, yeah, I'll see you in finals. And then we saw each other in finals, like, damn, that actually happened. We saw each other in finals, and we sat down to the match, and then a Bushiroad staff came up to us and they were like, oh, do you mind if I film this because I want to make a written report about this final match and like how your decks work, if that's okay with you. And I was like, yeah, sure, you can even like upload the recording if you want to, like I really don't mind. But then he was just like filming with his hand camera like from afar, so he's like, I can't really upload that because it doesn't look very good. And so we sat down to play that match, and I feel like again I played out of my mind. Natsuki didn't actually know how Eva works, so I had to explain every single card, and I think that was one of the big edges for Eva going into this tournament, is that a lot of people didn't have experience playing against the deck yet, and if they were bringing the deck, they didn't have experience against the mirror, or they just didn't have the deck complete, you know, if they didn't have the 4th research order because it is a promo. And so we played the finals, and I just felt in control the entire time again because against Overlord, I'm running fronts, which means that when the end swings for 18 for the first swing, I can 2 to pass it, and then even if, or like I can drop the front and then intercept with an Obscudate to make a no pass, and then basically just take the second Vanguard swing or PG the second Vanguard swing as necessary. necessary. And I can bind Burning Horns, which is really big because that is a super important combo part. Same for the Babsagara matchup, I can bind Trick Wounds, which means they never get it back. So that was a really huge part of the mirror match there. Same goes actually for the Flagberg matchup. I can bind the promo in the back row too, so they never get it back either with their, you know, all their revival orders that they have. So again, just felt very confident and honestly very secure in the finals matchup as well. And so I won my final match and I was like, nice, all right, I got it. Now I just need one of my teammates to win. And then Yuki basically played against a Bruce that checked like defensive draws twice and then like healed twice despite Yuki like seeing crits early. So he just basically like just could not put in the damage and the opponent just kept checking draws and seeing heals and just could not make it, you know, past that. And then Ayrton spent a turn without seeing grade 4 Kairi, which unfortunately against Overlord, a very fast deck, it's pretty difficult. So with that, we ended up being second, and it kind of worked out because, you know, we're both like Ayrton is splitting off into another team and we're playing with Haripin in both Yokohama and Tokyo and any other events we're going to go to. So if we had won, it would have been a bit awkward for all of our other teammates because basically, you know, we're basically screwing over 4 people by winning. So it kind of worked out, but in the end, I am very happy. It was very nice because when the Bushra employee gave me the certificate, even though my username is just DF in Japan, he went through the effort and said DifferentFight. I was like, ah, that's nice. You actually know who I am. So it's kind of nice. I'm never sure if like the Japanese side actually is aware or not, but it's always cool. Humble brag, I'm sorry. But yes, TLDR, Eva is really good. I really recommend it. It's by far the deck I've clicked with the most in the history of playing Overdress. I feel like the deck just feels so much fun to play. It's very different from other decks. It doesn't have a like very specific game plan. You just kind of like adapt to whatever matchup you're playing and you adapt to whatever your hand throws at you. And I'll go through much more depth of the deck when I go over the deck profile, which will probably go up like tomorrow or the day after that. So you can look forward to that because I'm pretty excited to talk about it. But that's it. That was my run in WGP Nagoya. It was very exciting to talk to a bunch of people. I got to see people I don't see very often because they live on the other side of Japan. And I got to have some really exciting games and learn a lot about my deck and feel very confident to continue bringing it into tournaments. And I'm definitely going to continue to play locals. I'm actually playing another locals in 3 hours time, so we'll see if I can keep up my win streak going, if it'll finally end today. Honestly, there's a lot of pressure to keep it going, so I kind of want it to end at some point. But Yokohama is in just 1 week now, so basically it is the next weekend after this, and I'm very excited to see how it's gonna go. I am 100% aiming for a win. At this point, I got my second place. I'm very excited. I'm very glad that I could get the second place in Nagoya, but I'm hungry for first place. I want to get that qualification into finals in December because that's going to be streamed, and you know, I want to see what that competition is going to feel like, you know, making it to the national finals. So yes, that's been it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like. Also follow me on Twitter because that's where I immediately post about these tournaments all the time, and it takes me a while to make videos about them like this. And of course, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the YouTube as well. And if you want to give me some extra support in everything I do and afford these train fares to go to these events, consider becoming a YouTube channel member. We have a specific section of my Discord dedicated to YouTube channel members and the Twitch subscribers, and I will also resume the remote tournaments for Twitch subs and YouTube channel members pretty soon, probably the week after WGP Yokohama. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.